Hello gamers, this is Sai and welcome back to Which Way Games. Now what terrors can be found beyond the veil? And with that being said, let's get on with the video. The supernatural has always been a place where mankind's had questions. Such questions as who the entities that visit the world of the living, where can the points of heaven and hell be found, and what actually happens to the human soul once it sheds its mortal coil. All these questions may never be answered, but this hasn't stopped mankind in the pursuit for knowledge when it comes to the worlds of the supernatural and the occult. Throughout history, mankind has used rituals as a way to speak to beings from the other side, but no one can never be quite sure who or what will come through. Sometimes portals to the world of the living are created, trapping lost souls, as well as allowing malevolent beings to possess the world of the living. Now, possession isn't always about living creatures. Sometimes dark entities of the unknown can attach themselves to objects. With this binding, a permanent link is made, allowing the object to become a conduit between worlds, especially for those darker entities that have never taken on a human form. Now, speaking of these conduits that are a pathway to the other side, I get that weird feeling when I hold this teddy bear that I found while exploring this mansion. In fact, I wonder. Whoa, I knew it was. This is the stuff of nightmares. Actually, this reminds me of a game that I used to play called Shadowman that had gamers traversing back and forth to Deadside. And with that in mind, let's go back to where it all started. All the way back in the late 90s, the world seemed obsessed with the turn of the century and what the new millennia would bring. Some claimed that all technology would stop working, whereas others claimed it was the beginning of the end. Game developer Acclaim, who'd acquired Valiant Comics and Iguana Entertainment, had a whole library of creative content to play around with, especially the classic Turok comic series, which led to a Nintendo 64 classic. This was the fantastic Turok Dinosaur Hunter, which had 4 games in total, definitely one I'll come back to. So Acclaim once again looked towards a Valiant comic line for ideas, and one comic series that caught their eye starred a man who used the power of voodoo to become a walker between worlds, while being bestowed supernatural powers. This of course was Shadowman, which had inspiration by real life serial killers and the world of the occult, as well as having a very complex story. One fateful night in 1999, Mama Nettie, a powerful voodoo priestess, has a dream in which 5 serial killers, known as the Five, will attempt to start the apocalypse on Earth. The 5 are being directed by a being of dark power, known only as Legion, who must find a way of transporting his army of immortal monsters to Liveside. These creatures of pain are powered by a thing called a dark soul, and the only way for them to traverse to the world of Liveside is through an asylum built by Jack the Ripper. In the intro, Jack can be found in the darkest reaches of Victorian London's underground, when suddenly Legion appears with the offer of immortality, but only if Jack takes his own life, in order to construct the asylum of pain and madness. Jack does so, and from there, Legion recruits the other serial killers that he deems worthy of bringing on the apocalypse. Now, Jack the Ripper was never caught nor was identified, although some claim to know who he was, and I have to admit that putting him inside the game of Shadowman was a very clever idea. After waking up from this nightmare of the future, Mama Nettie tasks Michael Leroy, aka Shadowman, with stopping the 5 and saving the world from the end of days. However, Shadowman can only travel to Deadside via a link between worlds, and this came in the form of a blood-stained teddy bear. Now, the game does skip over the narrative of how Michael Leroy became Shadowman, but luckily for you at home, I'm here to fill in the blanks. Back before he was the Lord of Deadside, Michael Leroy was a talented English student who developed a taste for gambling, causing him to drop out of his studies. Taking up a job as a taxi driver in order to survive, one eventful night would change Michael's life forever. His passenger was killed in a drive-by shooting, leaving $20,000 in a briefcase which could turn Michael's life around. Taking the money, Michael went back home to New Orleans, spending on his family as well as paying for his kid brother's operation. However, the gang involved in the drive-by managed to track down Michael and threatened him and his family. Fearing the worst, Michael used the rest of the money to pay Oboko for spiritual protection against the gang. Sadly, on a drive out to dinner, Michael and his family were attacked by the gang, bullets flying through the vehicle from all directions. All the occupants apart from Michael had been killed. It seems that the protection he paid for was only intended for him. Due to the attack, Michael was in a coma for a year, and when he woke up, he couldn't remember who he was nor the events that transpired previously. Soon Michael began to drink heavily in the Wild at Heart bar, and the Bokor who promised his protection tracked Michael down and made him his zombie slave. Mum and Nettie arrived with some local thugs to take revenge on the Bokor for a past transgression, and while they were busy, Mum and Nettie drags Michael into a secluded room. Using her powers of voodoo, Mum and Nettie implants the Mask of Shadows into the chest of Michael, returning his memories as well as granting him supernatural abilities. Michael became known as Shadowman, the Walker Between Worlds, and of course with his memories returned, he was tormented by them continuously. And from this, his adventures of the Lord of Deadside began, especially on a fateful night in 1999, of where the events of the game started. Gamers would find themselves controlling Michael Loire as he travels through the swamps of New Orleans in what is technically a tutorial level, showing gamers the controls as well as teasing a brief look into the realm of Deadside. From there, gamers would become Shadowman on his mission to stop the end of days, and along the way, he'd get help in the form of a certain Irish snake. This snake was called Jaunty, who met a terrible end thanks to some crazed students.
Did I ever tell you about the time me and Attila the Hun were playing skittles with the guillotine heads of the French aristocracy?
But bizarrely enough, he doesn't quite mind the outcome. Gamers would travel to Deadside searching for dark souls to make Shadowman stronger and able to deal with the inhabitants of this world in despair. But as gamers delved deeper into Deadside, as well as the Asylum of Pain, more grotesque and scary creatures made themselves known. Using his shadow gun and other weapons collected on his journey, Shadowman would also have to obtain magical abilities that would aid him in his adventure. These were protective tattoos found in the blood temples that housed many dark souls and also opened up other areas. Now, despite some great visuals and a fantastic story, Shadowman is not without its flaws. The tank-like controls did hinder some gamers, especially when it came to platforming, as well as getting somewhat lost thanks to the lack of an in-game map. Now, the map did come with the game, and I'm sure I have it somewhere at home in the games room. Now Sai's not here in the games room, maybe I could play some of his games and do my own reviews. I mean, how difficult can it be? Although now admitting it, I'd rather review this. I've got a weird feeling that something strange is going to happen when I get back home. Anyway, after Shadowman was released and becoming a bit of a cult classic, it was a few years later when a sequel was made called Shadowman Second Coming. The second game was set somewhat after the events of the first, where the end of world once again raises its head in the form of a demonic entity. This being of hell wants nothing more than to bring about Armageddon. But luckily, Shadowman is here to save the world from damnation. Now, despite Shadowman Second Coming doing its best to surpass the original, is somewhat regarded as a bit of a black sheep of the franchise. Unlike the original, which was more of a horror adventure game, Shadowman Second Coming felt like an action adventure. With more focus on the real world, the eeriness and the dark creeping atmosphere of the first game was missing. Fans of the first game also didn't like the new design of Michael, who had clearly been in the gym and beefed up, making him look like a generic bad guy from every other game. Although the look of Shadowman is cool, allowing gamers to see some of his supernatural qualities, I prefer the zombie look of the original. Overall, the first Shadowman is a great game to play, with an intricate story, memorable characters, and otherworldly visuals. Sadly though, it's often overlooked for other games, and falls just short of being perfect thanks to its tank-like controls. As for its sequel, that too was a fun game, but didn't quite have the same dark qualities compared to its predecessor. Some gamers though still talk about this great gaming series, and how it piqued their interests into the world of serial killers and the occult. Hopefully in time this classic game will get a remake, sorting out the tank-like controls and expanding some of the darker details of Deadside. Maybe gamers will once again become obsessed with the adventures of the Lord of Deadside, And with a whole new game, this could see Michael going up against the forces of heaven and hell. Either way, the Shadowman games will fit perfectly in any gamer's collection. Anyway, come back next time, where the horrors found within the mansion I've been exploring make themselves known. Can the Stars team survive and get back to Raccoon City so they can get on with their lives? Thank you so much for watching, and see you next game.
You